Well, no, that's not what it is.
Hello there. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 188, and that rolled off the tongue. And today's guest is Michelle Garrett. Michelle is one of the top names in PR. She is a public relations freelance writer and consultant. She's been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, PR Daily, and many other of the top outlets. And she hosts hashtag freelance chat and hashtag PR lunch hour on Twitter and Twitter Spaces. In this episode, we talk the best things you can do for your business in the PR space, the perks of being a freelancer, building a community, some Easter eggs, literally, and, of course, whether or not you should wear a hoodie in San Francisco. I never know. It is Michelle Garrett. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Michelle Garrett, my fellow Ohioan, as you're always known, Michelle, the PR expert extraordinaire, PR being Puerto Rico. No, PR being public relations, PR consultant and writer, one of the top names in the business, and an absolute gem on social media. Michelle, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Max. This is fun.
Of course. Well, I'm glad you're having fun now because it's all downhill from here. So enjoy it while it lasts. But we're gonna get into mostly Ohio, but some PR stuff as well. But I did want to start with the fact that you moved from Silicon Valley to Ohio, which is, it's basically like moving from one Caribbean island to the other. But those first couple years after moving back to Ohio, how was that transition after kind of experiencing the West Coast Silicon Valley life?
Well, it was not easy. I'll be very honest. I'm born and raised in Ohio, but I left, I guess I won't say I escaped the winters, but I did, I guess. So yeah. I went to the Bay Area.
I would say the same, but I'm still experiencing them. So I have no excuse.
Right. I went out there because I had a tech background and it was good timing. My job kind of went away here where I was. And I had a colleague that worked in technology. He worked at Silicon Graphics and he got me an interview with their PR team. And I got a job and moved on out there. And I kind of loved it out there, to be honest. I know sometimes people have negative things to say about it. But I really enjoyed it. And I got to work with not only, big companies like HP and Adobe, but then I also worked with small startups kind of in the heyday out there. So I loved that time.
I think no matter what move you're doing, it's just cool to experience cultures that are pretty different and population densities that are pretty different. But no, I'm sure it's a cool experience out there. But I always have love for Ohio, so I'm glad you're back. Good to hear.
Yeah, well, Ohio has its pros and cons as well. I mean, but you ask how it was to come back, and that is really different because I was just seeing one of the local business reporters tweeting about how the budgets, like the funding, is so different, and that does impact what they spend money on. Like how much they can spend on marketing and PR, and they kind of see it as more of a nice to have, but not a must here. So I just don't work as much with startups anymore. But that's neither here nor there. So
neither there, neither Midwest or Rust Belt or West Coast or whatever, left coast, whatever you want to say. So let's talk PR, public relations. It's something that I'm hoping you know a little bit about, considering we're talking. No, but you a true thought leader in the space, and basically on like every list of like top voices in PR, and I've built a business and freelance world around it. When was the first time that you heard about this thing called PR?
Oh, wow. Well, I think I got into PR after I figured out I loved writing, because writing was something I did, since I was little, like in high school, and I worked on the paper, then the school paper. And, then I went on to study journalism in school and college. And PR was kind of a specialization within that. And I think it probably sounded glamorous at the time. What I have learned, especially because I focus more on B2B clients, is that it is not always glamorous, but there are a lot of like parts of the job that I really enjoy, because there's so much variety and there are a lot of different ways you can be creative with it, and no two clients are alike.
When you have clients that are in vastly different spaces, like it really keeps it interesting and it makes it easier to be energized. So it's cool that you have that in your business as well. When did the idea in your head really pick up that like I'm gonna hone in on PR and make this my business?
I think it was probably when I moved out to the Bay Area, because I think I got such a sense that it was really important to companies out there. I just worked in-house in a PR job that was full-time PR out there. That was my very first job out there, and I hadn't really had that experience. I'd had touches of PR in my jobs prior to that, but out there it was all PR all day long. That's what it was. And I kind of started to really see how it brought together a lot of things that I like to do. And so I think that was real where it really came to life for me. And then I met people, I got involved in professional organizations, and I learned that working in PR as a consultant on your own is a very viable opportunity out there. It's something that I don't know if I'd have stayed here, I don't know if I really would have seen it that way as much. I knew that I always wanted to work for myself because my parents were both self-employed. So I didn't grow up in a house where people, went to an office every day. I didn't have that kind of lifestyle. And so it was something I always wanted to do. But I think the idea for the PR consulting practice really came to life out there.
Clearly, we have the same childhood because everybody from Ohio grows up and wants to be their own boss and had parents that were their own boss and work from home. It's the same thing for me. So, no, I love that. There's something really special about it. You mentioned wanting to be kind of, I'll call it the outside, but not in like a negative way. But you wanted to be your own boss and be valuable to a variety of different companies from that side as opposed to being within their company. What's your favorite part of that scenario?
I think it's so great to have the freedom and the flexibility to work with clients that get you, that you get, that, and if there are situations where that's not the case, you're able to move on. Whereas if you have a full-time job in-house, it's much harder, and all of your eggs are in that basket too. So, if you're going to make a move, it's just different than like maybe replacing a client, or maybe changing gears a little bit on the type of client you focus on. You have more, I just think you have more flexibility. And in this day and age, I just saw an article that backs this up. You really have more security, perhaps, because when you have a full-time job and you get laid off, there goes all of your income. Whereas if you're a freelancer who works with multiple clients, it's spread out a little bit more.
I'm gonna bookmark that term you said, eggs, because we're gonna come up to more eggs later. So we'll save that little foreshadowing. But that's spot on. That's something I remember my dad saying, like when my brother Andrew and I were really young. Like he said that back at our old house, like before we even got to like kindergarten age, he always felt that he had much more job security with like our family business that he started than like everybody else on the street we lived on who was all working for other jobs. Like it's totally right. It's when it's something you own and you can control that that security speaks a ton for itself. On the PR side, that's like a French pronunciation. on the PR side, what aspect of PR still to this day are you like most excited to work on every day?
Well, it's a little bit of a toss up for me because writing is my first love. However, and there was a time when I realized that, clients really want to be in the media. That's the part they really want. They want the media relations piece. And I saw a lot of people who were PR consultants who were moving away from doing that. Like, I'll do strategy, but if you actually want someone to execute and carry out the media relations piece, no, I don't do that. And I thought, wow, that's really odd to me. Like, if that's what clients want, shouldn't that be what you're providing? Unless, I mean, I understand why people don't like doing it. Like, there are some maybe misconceptions about it, or people that just honestly just really don't like it, and that's fair. But I've kind of leaned into that, and I actually love it under the right circumstances. So, it's different trying to get a startup on the map. That's really difficult, especially now. I'm not going to lie about that. Versus dealing with a company that's more mature, that maybe has 100, 200 employees, that maybe, has, I don't know, I don't know what I want to say about profits, but like, a company
No,
that's,
I'm going to hold you to like the second decimal place.
somebody that's established in the industry. It makes sense that it would be less of a challenge. And I feel like they just have a lot more to bring to the table. So now when I evaluate who I want to work with client wise, it's always about, okay, what are they bringing to the table? Yes. What am I bringing? They want to know that, of course, but what are they bringing? Are they bringing, customer case studies, customer references? Do they have a CEO that's a great spokesperson, a thought leader? Can we work on making him a thought leader? If not, what do they bring to the table that I can work with? Because if you don't have material to work with, it's really hard. And that's why I think getting a startup off the ground, for example, is a lot more difficult than working with a company that's more established.
It does sound very difficult. And I think, I think anybody who's started their own business or been through any sort of startup phase is just like, you hear the word startup now and it's like, oh my God, I'm like exhausted just thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, I used to love it, but it just got
Yeah,
really difficult over the years, I think.
right. Let's say you're a startup or a company that just has something new that they want to share out in the world. From a PR standpoint, what's the, and you can tell I'm very well versed in PR. What's the best thing that you can do kind of on a consistent basis to make an impact with your PR efforts?
Well, consistency is huge, first of all. It's not like you can just show up one day and then do nothing else. I've talked to, prospective clients will say, well, we put out a press release or we pitched a few reporters and nothing happened. So, PR doesn't work. Well, no, that's not what it is. I think, first of all, today there's a few things that go in that need to be there before you even start a PR push, and social media presence is one of them, right? Because if you pitch a reporter, they're going to look at your website and they're going to look at your social media outlets, your platforms. So if you say you started a Twitter account 2 years ago and you haven't posted in months or years or whatever, that doesn't really present itself very well to the reporter. So I always advise, first, make sure your website, looks good. Make sure you have like a newsroom or press room or somewhere where you have information about your company. You can put your press releases there. You can put the executive bios. You can put logos, whatever. There's a variety of things you can put there. Make it easy for reporters to find all of that information that they're going to be looking for. And then also take a look at your social media platforms and see. And I'm not saying you have to be on 10. I'm just saying maybe Twitter, LinkedIn, if you're in the B2B world, are, those are the ones that I would probably suggest. So those things first. And then, people say, well, I think you need to be, putting some thought leadership out there, whether it's on your blog or in the form of contributed articles to publications in your industry, for example. You have to be out there. You have to be consistent. If you don't have a new product or new service announcement every month or whatever, that's okay. You don't have to put out a press release, every time you turn around about every single thing you do. I think it's about kind of showing some momentum, consistency, having relationships with reporters in your industry helps. And just kind of like checking in almost like, here's what happens, because once you get the momentum going and they see you as a resource, they come to you for comments, for articles. So they'll be, writing about supply chain or something like that. Well, they're going to call on the CEO to see, or just send you a note and say, hey, do you guys have a comment on this article? And they might quote other companies as well, but you're still in the article. And it was very minimal effort on your part, probably, because they're going to send you a few questions via email or maybe have a 10-minute phone call or whatever. And then there's your name, usually with a link in an industry publication. I think that there's just something to kind of keeping up with it. And sometimes people say, well, how long does it take? And I'm like, well, you definitely want to give it at least 3 to 6 months to see if it's working. Like you don't want to just, like I said, do one press release or one push, one, round of media outreach and say, well, it didn't work. You have to follow up. You have to stay out there. You have to keep everything kind of all the balls in the air, So there's a lot to it, I think, but it also doesn't have to be like crazy overdone. You don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars a month on it, anything like that.
You can spend 999 and make a huge impact. I like your point on when you get to the point that reporters are like reaching out to you as an expert, a thought leader in the space. That's gold. That's like, I get excited thinking about that. It's like when you have, it's like when you start getting referrals for your business and it's like, oh my God, that, like people are sending them your way. It's the same sort of thing from a public relations standpoint. But from I think like for somebody who's like not as experienced as Michelle Garrett in the PR world,
right?
What advice do you have for creating and fostering relationships with really great reporters that can turn into long-term buddies like that?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is figure out where your audience is spending time, right? So you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall kind of thing. Like you're actually, you do a little bit of research to find out, okay, well, our buyers, our prospects are reading these publications, or they're going to these events, these trade shows. And back in the day, I don't know if everyone's back to trade shows, but you know what I mean? Like to figure out where they're hanging out, what communities are they in? Like maybe what Twitter chats they go to, what podcasts they listen to, figure that out. Also, don't try to go after like 100 targets at a time. Maybe pick 20, 25, the top ones that you really want to pursue, and then start following them on social media. Maybe start like softly, like kind of not, you don't want to hard sell right away. You just want to follow them, maybe engage with them a little bit on social media. I use Twitter a lot in PR. So to me, it's one of the best places because that's where the reporters are hanging out. That's why I even got to Twitter, went on Twitter in the first place. It's become a lot more than that for me, but that's where reporters are hanging out. They keep their bios updated there. Sometimes you can pitch them via DMs right there. And even if you're not ready to pitch them a story, you can like what they share. You can like their stories. You can comment. Sometimes they kind of engage on there. It's more like a human to human type of situation versus you just yelling at them, trying to sell and push. And that's a turn off for reporters. So I would say just start kind of like, following their publications, following them, maybe sharing some of their articles, just soft like that. That's a good way to start.
Yeah, Twitter is, love it or hate it or in between it, any way you slice it, it is a phenomenal place for conversation. And I think people are much more accessible there more often than not. So you can create those relationships in the way that you're talking about and start not hard selling right away, but actually, have conversations and interact with people. You have kind of taken the next step of that. You've created your Twitter chat, freelance chat. You've also got the PR lunch hour spaces. So you're kind of diving deep into all these different areas of it. For somebody who's like considering creating a live event like that, whether it be a Twitter chat or live spaces, Twitter spaces, what's the impact that you've seen for your brand and just people involved in doing those sort of things?
Well, I mean, I think it can kind of position you again, almost as a thought leader. And it definitely can help you build your own community because that's exactly what has happened in both of those cases. Freelance chat started over like 3.5 years ago. I started that. And, Twitter launched communities. And so I had applied back in the fall when they announced it to have a community for freelance chat because I wanted a place where people who came to the chat could, congregate during the week or ask questions, just have a place because people had talked about that. And I think, for me, I don't really, I don't monetize the chat at all. So there's just the chat on Thursday. So people wanted something more than that. So since then, they gave me the green light to start a community. So we now have a community. It's invite only. People really should come to the chat. And then, I'll invite them to the community if they're.
As long as they don't hard sell you right away.
Yeah, right. Well, we have rules in the community. That's one of the rules. But our community is pretty, I mean, even without the actual Twitter community freelance chat, the people that come are very supportive and they're not super salesy usually. We have a few people that do that, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
they quickly understand or learn or see that that's not the vibe there, so they got to get the hint, like, without me saying anything. And then on Friday on PR Lunch Hour, which is the space, that's also turned into somewhat of a community as well, because we have regulars that show up almost every week that we call on to share their thoughts or comment or whatever. So they both really have become that for us. And I look forward to seeing those people every Thursday and Friday on those respective, platforms.
The platform that is a perfect fit for you, you just might not know it yet, could be podcasting. If podcasting is something that you thought it might be cool to do sometime, and actually you could tie it back to your business or your personal brand, whatever you're trying to communicate and connect with people in, and just put out some awesome storytelling and tips in. Hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will help you bring this podcast to life and take loads and loads of editing time off your plate, which is kind of crazy time consuming. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high quality podcast. Now, let's find out exactly what Michelle is talking about. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a fan favorite segment, which you alluded to with all your eggs in one basket earlier. This is the Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
The Wild Business Shoutout of the Week!
What? I appreciate it. I'm flattered. Wild Business Shoutout of the Week is where we talk about a marketing campaign, ad, something really, really clever and breakthrough. And this is a really, really good one. Cadbury or Codbury, I don't know how to say it. Cadbury Worldwide Hide. Can you share what this is and why it stood out to you?
Yes. I mean, first of all, Easter's coming, right? And who doesn't like Easter eggs, right? Easter baskets and chocolate eggs and, anything Easter right now. So the Cadbury Worldwide Hide, I'm just going to read this because it'll be easier than me trying to describe it myself, is a digital platform that allows people to use Google Maps Street View to hide an egg and then share a personalized clue with a loved one to help them find it. So it's all digital, obviously. They actually do hide a couple of, I think, real giant eggs over in the UK. And they hide them at soccer stadiums and things like that. They call it the huge hides. 2 huge hides will pop up, 2 giant purple Cadbury eggs, each measuring 3 meters in height, will bring the worldwide hide experience into the real world. So there are different components of the campaign, but I just think it's really fun.
It is, yeah. And you shared this with me. I was checking out the website, and I thought it was so cool because, I mean, just the image or the thought of these giant Easter eggs in all sorts of different places around the world is cool on its own. And then the fact they made it have like a relationship or a social sharing aspect to it, where you can invite somebody and kind of challenge somebody, and it's just really, really clever and breakthrough. I think more companies should just start integrating activities with Google Maps, because it's pretty much the coolest thing ever when you have like a geographic aspect to it.
Yeah, I think it's really fun, and I'm gonna try to. I'll maybe have to take advantage of it and hide some eggs for some folks. So
perfect. You heard it here first. But let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get wild. 2 kids, 4 cats.
Yes.
Is it harder to parent? Is it harder to raise 2 kids or 4 cats?
Oh, golly, the kids.
A little bit more. Yeah. Okay. What is a quirk you have? Something that's a little quirky about your personality, maybe your kids or cats or somebody calls you out for, but it's just who you are.
Oh, wow. I was like, how long do you have?
We can,
well,
come back for round 2 if you need it.
Right. No, I mean, like in a business sense, it's the whole pick your brain phrase, which I loathe that phrase. And most people that know me very well know that I hate that phrase. I don't mind the idea of somebody asking you a question.
I won't say it.
Don't get me wrong, but that phrase, I don't like it.
Ooh, wait, shout out real quick to my second guest ever, Brendan O'Mara, back in episode 2. That was like something he brought up, is that he hates a phrase. So we're going, almost 200 episodes later, that phrase is unanimously hated.
Right.
And then I've only been to the Bay Area once, and it's beautiful. And as you said, there's a lot to like, and obviously there's some parts not to like as well. But like the one part that really grinded my gears, and maybe it was the time of the year that we were there, but I was constantly too hot or too cold. Like I was constantly putting on a hoodie and then taking it off and then putting it on and taking it out. Like I just couldn't figure it out. So would you say the Bay Area is a more hoodie on or hoodie off area?
I'm going to say hoodie off because I lived in the valley near San Jose, and it definitely gets a little warm. And I'm sure, now it's probably even warmer than when I lived there. So,
right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, to be fair, we were just in the like pretty much downtown San Francisco area, and it was definitely pretty windy and up and down. But
there's a quote about that, like a famous,
oh, yeah?
Mark Twain said it, the coldest, the I don't know, something about the coldest summer he ever spent was in San Francisco or something. Yes, that's 100% true.
I definitely feel that. Well, I'm cold and warm thinking about it. But Michelle, thank you so much. This has been phenomenal. Really, really appreciate your PR tips, your stories, your love for Ohio and gone and back again. But where's the best place for people to connect with you, learn more about what you do, and just speak with you if they want?
Sure. Well, I'm on Twitter quite a bit, so you can catch me over there. I'm at PR is Us on Twitter. I have a website. I have a newsletter and a blog. That's just michellegarrett.com, 2 L's, 2 R's, 2 T's. Those are probably the two best ways. I'm on LinkedIn, but yeah, not as often as Twitter. Let's put it that way. So,
right. Excellent. And then last thing, final thought, stage is yours. It could be a quote, a line. It could be an idiom about eggs or spaghetti, whatever you want. Send us home here.
Oh, wow. Gosh, now you are putting me on the spot, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my favorite quote, and this is kind of a serious quote, but it's a Maya Angelou quote. It's people will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you make them feel. And to me, that is pretty much a guiding principle for me in everything that I do. So.
And that feels just about right. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your story, your tips, your love for the wonderful, best state in the land of Ohio. That no arguments. That's the truth. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. And then practice PR, thanks to Michelle. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there's some awesome podcasts and podcasters and podcasts and podcasters. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!